I guess you could say that there's been a bit of drama associated with the cotton mills over the years. The film Norma Ray tells the story of a successful textile union bid in Roanoke Rapids. Olive Ann Burns' book Cold Sassy Tree, a story of class conflict in a southern cotton mill town, has been adapted into an opera.
I urge every person with the sound of my voice to join the union. We must join forces. Union!
And now there are a couple of plays on the theater circuit that make this culture come to life again. Mill Worker started out as a class project at Central Carolina Community College in Sanford. Ellen Bland and Drew Lassiter took the book like a family and adapted it for the stage.
Monday morning, you hit the mill, you'd have a tough time. You'd cough and fill your mouth so full of tobacco, anything else to keep the dust from strangling.
Because the book was comprised of interviews with real people, the things they said, there's no way a playwright could write anything that incredible.
Now there was one man, his shirt or something got caught in that belt, and it threw him to the top of the mill.
I thought that I could string together all of those stories, those recollections of those people.
They had big beams up there, and he just hit it at the back of his head, busted his brains out, and they killed him.
Recollections of hardship, as well as fond memories of cotton mill life, helped to create the production's dynamic tension.
It became clear to me that I needed to be sensitive to the pride in the work, the positive dimensions, and again, that's what initially drew me to the material to begin with.
And that noise, it about made me dead. But there never was a time that I wasn't proud of my job in the mill.
These first-hand accounts, along with the show's musical numbers, make for a powerful mill-working experience.
And while we slave for the bosses, our children scream and cry.
Musical numbers were carefully selected to help weave the mill stories into a finished piece of fabric.
I've spent my life at the cotton mill. This is what you see at the foot of the hill.
Alice Zincone is the show's musical director.
Alice was really good about coming up with song ideas. She was the one who resurrected that Blue Sky Boys song, S-A-V-E-D, which I thought was really perfect.
It's a G-L-O-R-Y to know that I'm S-A-V-E-D. I'm H-A-P-P-Y because I'm F-R-E-E. I once was B-O-U-N-D with the chains of S-I-N, but it's a V-I-C-T-O-R-Y to know I've Christ within.
Mill Worker was first performed at the Chatham Mill in Pittsburgh. 400 people showed up to watch the play.
At the end of the first production, a big old guy in overalls and a beard took my hand and said, I want to tell you, that place where I was sitting tonight in this audience, he said, that's where my looms sit. And he was just crying. He said, I spent most of my life here.
The show was such a hit that performances across the state followed.
I wanted the audience to hear these people's voices.
The mill community was one big old family.
I wanted them to have a real sense of that part of the history of North Carolina.
Finding Clara is another play that breathes new life into cotton mill history. The play is historical fiction. It's based on the 1929 Loray Mill strike in Gastonia.
Well, this ain't no boogeyman stuff, Alice. Lucy done got her hair caught up in the speeder frame and it just plumb tore off her scalp, all every hair in her head. And it's that damn Conlon's fault for working us like dogs during this stretch out.
It is not Jimmy's fault.
The people I had talked to in Rockingham County, mill workers, people who have been in the mills for all their lives, I was interested in their story. And it became a lens for me to look at Southern history and also look at what was happening in the South now.
The play's central character, Mary Victoria, is a mill worker who's right in the middle of a violent labor strike. Her love for a black doctor also rips a hole in the Southern social fabric.
I think it's an important part of the play. What happens to these two people as a result of this horrible hate and anger, that surrounds them?
I just want a good job, Miss Ella. Maybe if we get the union here, something can be done for the colored workers.
Ella Mae Wiggins, a legendary labor organizer, is one of the play's characters based on real people. She was shot to death and no one was ever convicted for the crime. Some say she was killed because she tried to improve the lot of black workers as well as white.
I've spoken to Ella's family, her descendants, and interviewed them, and also some of them came up to see the show when it premiered at SARD, and I was so happy that they liked it.
Finding Clara was selected for production at the Southern Appalachian Repertory Theater and has won numerous recognitions. Parts of the play were performed at the Lorraine Mill Symposium in Gastonia. The part of Ella Mae Wiggins was performed by her own granddaughter, Christina Horton, a schoolteacher.
I felt like history had come full circle.
String you up just for talking like that.
I'm glad I wrote Finding Clara.
Cotton Fields to Skyscrapers. It's a true story, the story of Charlotte and how it grew into one of America's leading financial centers. Cotton Fields to Skyscrapers, it's also the name of a permanent exhibit you'll find at the Looming Museum of the New South. The museum is dedicated to telling the region's history after the Civil War to the present day. Cotton and cotton mills are central to that story.
What's now Bank of America began with Commercial National Bank. That was a textile mill bank in the 1870s. What's now Wachovia started out as Union National Bank, founded by a cotton broker.
When people think of history, they may think of Colonial, Williamsburg, or Charleston. But the Charlotte region has its own unique story to tell. It's the story of a defeated people who had to reinvent themselves. A story of men, women, and children who made the transition from the farm to the factory floor. At the Museum of the New South, you'll also hear the stories of mill owners, including the black industrialist Warren Coleman. Coleman owned and operated the Coleman Manufacturing Company in Concord. The mill produced yarn and employed only African Americans.
The South is fascinating to study because so much of what's played out through American history played out here very quickly. All of those conflicts over child labor, over whether women should work, whether black people should work, whether unions should happen, were things that happened here in the 20th century.
The cotton mill, it was the stage for these conflicts. Textile manufacturing is the story of the New South, from Jim Crow to the Civil Rights Movement and beyond.
The voice that is always with me when I'm thinking about textile history is the voice of Corinne Cannon, who was one of the African American women who'd been kept out of the mills.
They did not hire Afro-Americans for productive jobs such as anything. It was just hard labor, unskilled labor that they were usually used for. So I was very apprehensive about that because I didn't want to go in on that level.
In the early 1960s, she was one of the first black folks to break that old barrier.
I felt blessed to be getting a job. After training, after a few weeks, I was on production like everybody else. When I went there was white and colored water, white and colored restroom, but within the 6 months, the first 6 months, within that time, all that was changed.
In the South, change has been constant during the last 100 years. Some of these changes have been and continue to be difficult. As textile jobs go to foreign countries, the cotton mill way of life in the South is gasping for its last breath. A special exhibit at the museum, Sunrise to Sunset, Mill Towns of the Southern Piedmont, captured the beauty and despair of contemporary life in a southern mill town.
Laurel Falls first came to us when she was a photographer at the Business Journal. She said, "I grew up in this area and I've been taking pictures. Would you like to see them?"
With all the media choices at our disposal today, the photograph still has an awesome power to tell a story. Laurel Falls was able to capture the experience of today's mill workers, much as Lewis Hines did in the early part of the 20th century. The work of Hines and the Charlotte minister, Alexander J. McElway, raised awareness of child labor reform. And even though child labor declined, a formal law on child labor was not passed until 1938. Yes, you'll learn about Alexander McElway, Stuart Kramer, and Uncle Charlie Cannon. And you'll learn about air conditioning.
Cotton had to be constantly kept moist.
I was driving through Belmont, and there was a plaque there for Willis Carrier, who'd come down and worked in the mills in Belmont around a little after 1900, perfecting this new temperature and humidity control system. And so this guy, Willis Carrier, had done some work there. And I went, Carrier? That's Carrier air conditioning.
The Museum of the New South is full of surprises, and as you walk through the exhibits, you might find yourself saying, wait a minute, this is my history, this is my story. As far as the future of the New South is concerned, it doesn't matter where you came from. You've got an important part to play. So come on over to 200 East 7th Street in Charlotte and set a spell. Take a well-deserved time out and rest yourself. After all, making history is hard work.